First of all, this is the easiest question. What is your name and what is your occupation job title?
So I am Rao Kambhampati, Subbarao Kambhampati, and I'm a professor at Arizona State University. And I also served as the president of the Association for Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, which is the main scientific society for artificial intelligence until this summer. And I'm also a chief scientific officer for AI Foundation, which is a for-profit plus non-profit company. In their both sides, actually, they wind up trying to use synthetic reality. In one case, they're using it for the good use. In the other case, they're trying to defend against the bad uses. So that's the connection. Okay.
That's great. So, what is a deepfake?
So, just give me a second. So deep fakes essentially has become the catch-all term for the ability of AI technology to come up with artifacts that don't exist in the real world. So most of the time it has been about perceptual artifacts, so coming up with images that don't exist, coming up with faces of people that don't exist, coming up with voices that don't actually exist, are using existing voice to make it say something that the actual person possessing that voice has not said. And finally, writing some big essay which looks as if it was written by you. So, for example, you can write something that is in the Shakespearean style, for example. So all of these are essentially synthetic artifacts that you are not taking. They're not a representation of the real world. It is something that the AI technology made from the whole cloth. So that has become, I guess, the more general way of calling it is synthetic reality. It's just that the word deep fakes has become the more generally used term. It has that negative connotation, but in fact, synthetic reality can be used for both good and bad. Okay.
Perfect. So, what are the components that are necessary to create a deepfake, and how is that? What is the process of it? In particular, the visual.
Okay. So obviously there is already existing technology before AI came along. Many years back, the great famous painters had their paintings essentially forgery. Somebody would do forgery of the painting. You can't tell the difference. I mean, you keep hearing about these stories where museums will find after many years that in fact it was a forgery. So forgeries existed for all the time, but in the very beginning they were fully manual. So somebody would essentially make either the painting, which is actually doesn't exist in the real world, or a forgery, which is like a fake painting. And then we came to the point of Photoshop, which is the Adobe Photoshop, which is now semi-manual. There's a lot that you can do. You can do forgeries much faster than in the good old days of oil paintings, where it would have taken much longer time. And then comes the AI technology, where essentially what you're doing is this is data-driven AI technology, where you look at a massive amount of data to look for patterns in it. In a technical way of saying it, essentially is that if an AI system, a particular machine learning system, is provided billions or millions of images to train itself on, that training normally has been to kind of figure out, to help us tell whether an image has a cat or a dog, etc. But in trying to classify images, you will come to a point where these technologies are also able to dream up images. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it turns out that in a technical sense, either classifying an image or making up an image can be understood in terms of you having access to some distribution in some large hyperdimensional space, where each point in this hyperdimensional space corresponds to an image. Okay, and so you basically are trying to get a sense of that distribution by looking at the real images. So those will be some points. And then you're sort of trying to interpolate between them. And when you interpolate, the points that you interpolated, I mean, here's a real image, here's a real image, and I just sort of made like a surface like this. Any point on the surface look very much like images, but they don't exist. They're not actually images of anything that somebody took pictures of. This is essentially what is behind generating new images. It's the same idea essentially for generating new voices. It's the same idea for generating new text. The only difference is in the case of images, the distribution is a spatial distribution. In the case of text, it is sort of a temporal distribution because text is sort of linear. And so you have a slightly different kinds of technologies that are used to either come up with new text or complete new text. So that's basically what is needed. And so the two sort of raw materials that you need to make the deepfakes happen are one is essentially the data, the humongous amount of images that you want to train your system with. And the second is a learning architecture and the compute power. And the compute power became possible of late because of these GPU technologies. Those are the raw materials that are needed. Okay.
That's great. And so right now, in this point in time, what have deepfakes been used for primarily? What are some of the avenues that people have kind of actually implemented this technology in a way that's more than just kind of testing? How has it been used?
So again, I think people have used it for both good and bad. Again, as I said, the word deepfake has become more popular term, but in reality, it is synthetic reality. And you can use synthetic reality for beneficial uses. You can use it also for nefarious uses. Okay, so I will actually want to talk about both of them because just to realize that we are not out there in the AI technology wasn't out to just come up with a better way of producing forgeries. It was, in essence, as I said, we were trying to understand visual world around us, visual or the written world around us. And when you do that, you will also get the ability to dream it up. Like little kids actually start having dreams. As soon as they start seeing the world around them, they start having dreams. Of course, one of the interesting questions is exactly what they are dreaming. We don't know because they don't know how to articulate, but they have the ability to dream. And the same way, the moment they start seeing text, they can start generating new text, they start generating new stories and so on. So this is sort of what we call creativity to some extent, is essentially AI taking over this creativity. So the positive uses are essentially things like you can, in the case of images, in the case of videos, for example, you could have a conversation with a mind twin of somebody. In fact, the company that I'm involved with, AI Foundation, for example, they do these things like mind twins. They have one, for example, for Deepak Chopra. So you will have a digital Deepak which you can interact with, as if you're talking to the real person on Zoom, let's say, and they would lead you through yoga in the case of digital Deepak. You could have a mind twin of Einstein. So imagine having the ability to have a conversation with Einstein. Just before the onset of this technology, there was this beautiful project that people at USC did where they realized that Holocaust survivors, it's a dying generation. They are no longer, many of them are very old, and that generation is passing away. And they wanted to preserve this ability of that future generations actually having interacted with people who were really there. And so they generated a sort of a mind twin, except they did it in a more manual way. They sort of had the real person sit there and record lots and lots of answers to lots and lots of questions, so that then when people talk to that, then they can use some voice recognition technology and that person will speak. Now you can do this in a much more automated way. So that's a great advantage of synthetic reality. Another place synthetic reality would be extremely useful would be in like entertainment in general. I mean, I always think that all of entertainment is willing suspension of disbelief. And with your help, I would like to suspend my disbelief and enjoy this story that you're telling me. And something like animation, for example, synthetic reality is going to be extremely useful. In fact, interestingly enough, animation might even be easier than real scenes for developing, for imagining it up, because the level of detail in animation, we are willing to have less detail in animation backgrounds than in real world, for example. So those are some of the advantages of the beneficial uses. And then there are all these nefarious uses. You can think of all sorts of ways. I can basically, if I can make you believe in a world that doesn't exist, then I can leverage that in many, many, many ways. So this has been what religion is about. This is what most of our shared realities have been about. And this is manipulating mental models, what you are thinking, that you are hearing, what you're thinking I will be doing, what you are thinking you are seeing, what you're thinking what will happen next. And the deepfake technology is just sort of the visual part of it. It's sort of trying to make you see a visual world that didn't actually exist. And if you believe it, then I can then make you go with a story that, and I can exploit that. So you can have advertisements where politicians are saying things that they have never said in real life. There are already lots and lots of such political advertisements right now. There have been the entertainment sorts of things where you will put different actors in an existing movie, so swap the actors around. Many of these things have been are being done right now already, and that actually is what given. And in fact, one of the other interesting things is you can combine the visual and audio together. So the very famous Obama videos, one of the first ones that basically caught attention of people quite a while back. Essentially, you can make, right now it turns out that Obama is the unpaid spokesperson for everybody, because you can put Obama a video up front in front of any talk I give, which will then introduce my talk in Obama voice and Obama mannerisms and everything. And this essentially is the ability of combining visual and voice technology together. The stakes become higher when that happens, because when a real person is speaking, it's not that the voice is coming from somewhere and the face is changing in its own way. We are like acutely attuned to, for example, whether lip sync being off when you're watching a video, right? And we basically, the audio is extremely high quality, the video is extremely high quality, but you can't see the video because the lips are not actually syncing with the audio that is going on. And you will notice it subconsciously and you get sick of seeing that video. So when an Obama video is made, one of the advantages is that it actually takes into account even this lip syncing process correctly. So that's where we are in terms of being able to use these kinds of technologies. Okay.
So crazy. It's such a crazy concept. I guess going off of the synthetic reality side of it, you had talked about religion and things like that, where a lot of what makes us who we are is our shared beliefs. It makes us a part of a group. So how, if we are able to create synthetic ones, and as they get more real and more real, what is how can we contain that in a way that is not just people are completely separated in how they think and how they believe? Like, what is stopping that from happening?
I mean, again, I think it's all of this is what we have done, except on steroids. So, Yuval Noah Harari, in his very gripping book, Sapiens, talks about why are humans different? And humans are different from anything else because we have shared imaginations, shared imaginary realities. There is no such thing as law. I mean, when I was a little kid, I had to think what government was. And I still vividly remember that there must be some huge physical structure called government, and I had this sort of a wall kind of image. That's what I thought as a kid. But what is government? Government is a set of rules that we agree to abide by. Law is a set of rules and set of realities that we agree to abide by. Religion is, of course, a classic case in point that started there. So we have always developed shared imaginations and sort of proselytized others to follow them, right? That's how, the difference between, let's say, one religion, which was big time taken by, with lot more adherents with other religion, is that the one essentially had a better story that they were able to get people to believe much faster. And so that they just subscribed to that imaginary reality. It's not real reality, it's just imaginary reality. And for once you do that, then essentially you are in a tribe together. Now, this is indeed, your point is extremely well taken. But even before, so in the old days, at the time of Paul, he had to go actually walking to people to kind of proselytize them. Then we came up with, higher technology. You could go by a car, then you can go by cars. You can then start talking on the radio. You can start talking on the TVs, right? At least there has to be Paul still involved, except he was reaching more people. Now I can essentially have multiple mind twins of Paul going to multiple different people, telling them the same story that he wants them to believe in an adaptive way to each of these people. And it indeed is going to increase, just sort of put on steroids, these things like how fast you can make religion, any religion. I use the religion in a very loose sense here. Religion, to me, is a shared reality, a shared imaginary reality that we all agree upon, the adherents agree upon. It's going to be much faster, okay? And so it's going to divide us, and we are already seeing that, across the world, the division has increased, Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. Previously, it will be like just there are like 5 different divisions and they will just be out to get each other. Now there are like hundreds of different divisions, from your QAnons to some, flying spaghetti monster to every possible shared reality, shared imagination. People might wind up subscribing to that. And it becomes, it is indeed going to be a case that the question of what do we all agree on, what is the common knowledge, is already under assault right now. And with deepfakes, it's just going to be, the process is going to become faster in general. But there is a different way of looking at it, which is that all of this is happening because to some extent they are exploiting our human frailties. We basically fall for any good story, right? It's just that's like in for us, and we need to know for things for which there is no causal explanation. We need to make one up. So you can't just, you have to have, somebody must have made this world, and then I need to come up with a nice little story, and then you'll believe it. If on the other hand, there's a perfectly valid scientific explanations which don't look that easily like a specific entity making things, you're not likely to fall for it, which has been our bane to some extent, in the human societies. But that is changing as more and more of this sort of diffuse religions, if I might say, and diffuse realities start being thrown at you. Your vulnerability to believing what you see, to believing what you hear, to believing what you read, is going to be substantially reduced, which is actually a positive thing. We don't often think about this. It's already true right now that my son is not as vulnerable as I am for deepfakes, right? In the sense that this is a new generation. They grew up with the fact of Photoshop generation. Photoshop generation already think, unless there is some real reason, a third-party authentication to believe this is a real picture, you can't just believe your eyes. Okay, and for them it's a smaller step to deal with deepfakes than for me,